There we are. It looks like we're live, or sort of.
Sure. Wow. Well, we're alive and kicking.
Yes, we're on the air, as it were.
As it were. Well, we're 2 days late. We said we would be here Saturday, but it was too
Yeah.
nice a day for me.
Well, it was the weekend, and we had a couple of social events to attend, and it was eye-opening. We can talk about that more, but here we are in episode number whatever, and
Well, it's season 4, episode 11, 12.
you keep that in your mind.
I'll have to check the records. People will wonder, if we know what we're doing, because we can't remember what episode this is.
Who are you again?
Well,
anyway,
yeah.
Whatever
sure.
it is, we try and do things on a schedule, but being a retired guy, sometimes that schedule just doesn't.
That's right. We are retired guys, and we are in the middle of a existential in Canada.
Yeah, well, supposedly that's what
we need. Well, I think we need to get our poop together as a country and stop making up stuff about what we're going to do when we haven't done them for 30 years. So in the first block, I think in pre-production, so we're going to talk about the trade situation.
Oh, before we get into that, though, we did actually get a cup of coffee. So whoever sent us that cup of coffee, thank you very much. It was well worth it.
Exactly. Now we need a few more to keep it going.
Yeah, well,
the A block, as we said, we're going to talk about the realities of the election vis-a-vis the trade situation. The second one was going to be the ethics of the election. Which we have some new information about that. And what was the third thing we were going to do in our 20, 30 minutes?
Oh, God.
Dementia.
You didn't take
dementia because we talked about a bunch of stuff in pre-production. But let's talk about the trade thing. So the latest sort of talk is that we have to spread our. It's okay. It's my marine clock going off. The latest thing is that we should be expanding our trade to other countries. But the trade with the U.S. apparently is over. We're not going to do anything with those people, according to one Mr. Carney, and to some extent one Mr. Poilievre too, because both of these guys, in my opinion, are playing a very stupid card here, which is we're going to teach the Americans a lesson. And I think the only lesson we're about to learn is that you don't go into the ring with an 800-pound gorilla and think you're going to win.
Well, that's right. Yeah,
that's the lesson that we're going to learn.
The lightweight going in with the heavyweight is exactly what's going on here. And, I agree in many respects that, yes, we've had a north-south trade plan for 100 years, 100 plus years. And if we want to change it, it's not going to happen because we decide today that we're going to change it. All this stuff, the infrastructure, the negotiations, the trying to find partners, takes decades to do. And then we have to try and figure out, well, we've got this stuff. Does anybody really want it? Obviously our steel is probably a thing that people would like. Our aluminum, certainly for the viewers out there that enjoy a cold beer on a warm afternoon, that's all aluminum, which if you can't get, what are you going to do? We can't all of a sudden start manufacturing beer bottle in glass anymore, because that's a whole brand new infrastructure that has to be built. So yeah, maybe we need to rethink things, but I think you're dreaming in Technicolor if you think it's going to happen tomorrow, or if by chance up here in Canada we get another another term for a Liberal government that'll happen on day one of their mandate, because I think they've been probably smoking some of that cannabis stuff they try and sell. It's not going to happen.
Well, how do you paper over 10 years, literally 10 years now, of liberal economic policy, which has given us a 1.4% GDP growth over 10 years, which is dead last in the OECD countries, never mind the G7. In many ways, we have no business being in the G7, considering that
anymore.
Record.
Yeah.
So if one is to use the logic of Albert Einstein, that if you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, then we are doing just that. We're expecting a guy who got parachuted here like a carpetbagger out of nowhere, who apparently has been giving advice to the previous government for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And now all that advice is apparently wrong. And now he's going to fix the same thing he gave advice on. Now that is, so stupid on its face and so disingenuous. I mean, you look at this and you go, are you serious? As I said to a colleague here just this morning, I said, if you talked to someone here 10 weeks ago about Mark Carney, they'd look at you and say, who are you talking about? I never heard of this guy, unless you had an old bill in your pocket that had his signature from, back in the last century, technically speaking. So, what are we talking about here? This business of boogeyman Trump and the tariffs. First of all, we all know that the universal tariffs that he threw out there was universal, and only 2 countries have decided to become antagonists about this, and that's China and Canada. And then the people in the upper echelons of this election campaign don't seem to understand why the American administration is not interested in talking to Canada on this. They're busy talking to the Chinese, and significantly so, because that is the real problem, except that Canada seems to have a strange relationship with China, and neither campaign talks much about China. No, certainly the Carney campaign, it's mute on China, because they're up to their necks in China, whether it's at a political level or an economic level. And, to be crass, I'd say they got a call from Walmart and they said, listen, don't push this too hard, because there'll be nothing on the shelves if you do the same thing that, Orange Man is doing in the US with China. Now, the Chinese influence in Canada, even in the liberal press, whether it's the CBC or CTV or whatever, knows and has reported on the excesses of the Chinese influence in Canada. And Mr. Carney and his gang know full well that you don't bite the hand that feeds you. Well, that's true. So that's the other 800-pound gorilla that you got to deal with.
Well, we don't, to use your analogy, we are the lightweight that's in the tag team heavyweight.
Yeah, that's right. Now you come to the point, well, who exactly are we shadow boxing with here?
And again, we have to sit back and think, maybe to jump into the next little topic here with influencing in an election. The U.S. president has indicated that he'd sooner deal with a liberal than he would a conservative. I don't know if that could be construed as being election influencing. But then we also have Mr. Carney, who has documented on a couple of occasions of what he is embracing with the Chinese, when he had one of his people that openly called for the arrest of a Canadian citizen for $1 million bounty to be turned over to Hong Kong, and he supported him. The gentleman did finally fall on his sword and leave the campaign trail, but he was replaced with a guy who has been over watching Chinese military drills. What does that tell you? And Mr. Carney, who whether he has selective memory or maybe he's just getting old like me, can't remember that he actually got a $250 million loan for something from the Chinese government. You can't tell me that those are things that would be overlooked or not expect pro quid.
Quid pro quo.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you and I are just two guys, trying to make sense of all this, and not particularly enmeshed with the politics of either leader. We're looking at it like everybody else from the outside in, and all we get is the media's portrayal of the policy. Well, there is no policy, frankly, that suggests to me that there's any change being contemplated by the liberal team, the Carney team.
Oh gosh, no.
It's more of the same. You fooled me 3 times, and I'm going to fool you a 4th time. And when you let's just take energy for example. Okay, and this plays into the Alberta argument, which it's you have to wonder why those people are still even bothering to care about this country. Carney said last night that they're going to choose some projects, some big ones, but not pipelines, not necessarily pipelines, but maybe pipelines. He doesn't know what the hell to do. Yeah. He is not interested in pipeline building. Okay, he is misrepresenting and misleading every single voter in this country. If we are to believe he's going to stand up to Mr. Legault or the Bloc and say we're going to put a pipeline through Quebec, that's not going to happen. Okay, any more than he's going to put a pipeline through your neck of the woods.
Yeah. We talked about that before too, with in the United States in particular. I guess you were talking about the pipeline going through New York State, an eminent domain. We could probably use the same kind of terminology here and say, well, the Trans-Canada Highway is going through Quebec, and maybe that's our eminent domain. I don't know. And you got to. I don't know. We've got a lot of different things going on. Mr. Poilievre says he's going to have a 3-strike rule, which sounds very American as it goes, with what California did with their criminals. And he's willing to use the notwithstanding clause. Well, that has got Mr. Carney up in arms about you can't, that's going to lead down a dangerous path. But if I remember correctly, he was also one of the guys that was very, very instrumental in getting the Emergency Act in play for the trucker convoy, which was later ruled by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional. So we've got somebody who has already proven that they'll break the law and go at it with impunity versus somebody who says that they may have to do that.
I'm more concerned this morning, for example, about the peripheral ideas that are coming out of the Carney campaign, particularly the censorship issue. When you link that to the evident relationship between China, which censors all sorts of things, okay, where the rule of law is basically for the oligarchs and not the little people, right? There are some very disturbing links that I see that the media, particularly the CBC and other mainstream, doesn't want to touch with the barge pole.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you asking Carney about that? This business about, the media is the online media in the U.S. is a swamp. It's full of misogynists and racists and all that. And I'm gonna deal with that, says Carney. Yeah, it's like a 3rd time. We got to get this censorship thing. We got to get X, for example. We got to get rid of that. We got to get Elon Musk out of our hair. What are you talking about? And then he also, just to make sure that his censorship idea is then fattened up just a little bit by add another $150 million to the CBC, so the propaganda machine of the state media can, blanket. I mean, this is so Soviet thinking.
Well, it's.
But I guess if you look at what goes on in China.
Oh. Oh, you're there. I thought you froze for a minute.
No, I'm just waiting for. No. I thought you were going to say something profound.
Oh, it might have been important, but no. Maybe, I don't know. It just could have been that senior moment where I thought I had something to say and it didn't come out.
Look, no, but I think it's basically this anti-American problem that Carney has, and I don't know. It's interesting since he's been living in New York for a while. I don't know why he's so anti-American. This Carney doesn't like large American media platforms. Well, that's probably because it doesn't play to the game with Canadian media. This is the unelected prime minister that keeps shoveling out money to the big corporation. Why does Bell Canada need the money? Well, why does the CBC need this money, or Global? Why don't they just report the news? And if
I guess
you want to be in makers, do it on your own dime, not on the taxpayers' dime.
Yeah. And again, like if you're going to give the CBC more money, then I don't want to see Ford ads or beer ads or any kind of ads, right? I mean, that's, if you're already taking that kind of money, then whatever you're bringing in and those kinds of revenue should be deducted from what you're getting from the public trough. You can't just, we have that out here with our TransLink system. They come up with these grandiose plans to have buses running every 2.5 minutes down the center of every street and every corner. But it's going to cost us billions and billions of dollars. Well, the ace geniuses that run our province out here had a carbon tax. Well, it's gone now. But the other taxes that are in there are taxes on the road, and there's a TransLink tax built into it. Now, me, as an ICE car vehicle, I still am buying gas by the liter. So I'm paying the road tax, and I'm paying the transit tax. But if I happen to have one of those electric cars that the government wants us all to have by 2035,
exclusively,
I don't know if these, again, ace geniuses, if everybody is in an electric car by 2035, where is the money for road improvement and TransLink going to come from? Because nobody's going to be buying gas.
Correct.
It just goes beyond my comprehension how they're doing this. And then now TransLink gets another $300 million over the next 3 years from the government because they needed to increase their, well, I'd like to have a color TV in every room of my house, but I can't afford it. Yes. You have to make choices. And if your plan is too grandiose, then maybe you have to cut it back. Budgets are budgets. They're not, well, you're the guesstimates, I guess. But
look, I think we live in a country that has sometimes some brilliant engineers, doctors, even lawyers. Mm-hmm. And then we have wacky stuff and weird stuff at the political level, certainly at the cultural level, which is just juvenile at best and dangerous at worst.
As you mentioned during pre-production, it was out here in Vancouver, they were booing the national anthem.
Yep.
This is grade 6 level thought here.
Yes.
You're booing a national anthem, but you're booing it against a team that probably has Canadian players on it, and you're supporting your own team, which probably has American players on it.
You don't think this goes unnoticed in the U.S., please? And we would be equally upset if this.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're old enough to remember the time when the Toronto Blue Jays were in the World Series. That's a long time ago. Do you remember when the Marines brought in the flag and it was upside down? And at the Blue Jay, well, I remember, and people were horrified that they didn't know which way the Canadian flag should be, and they actually brought it out. The Marine band brought it out onto the field. And the flag was upside down because I don't know. Okay,
but they knew then that we were in distress.
Well, yeah, it happened since, I don't know. I noticed that in your neck of the woods this morning's Times Colonist, the
Yeah,
Times Colonist on Victoria Island, the
yeah,
front page of the paper says, "Here on the island, we vote NDP to stop the Conservatives."
yeah.
I have to laugh. I mean, are they, what is in the water in Victoria?
Well, I think the prevailing winds are blowing off of Salt Spring, and Salt Spring is very hippy-dippy-ish where Elizabeth May resides. And they've been
Or on
well
the
known for
island?
years
Is
and
this
years
something?
and years of being the smokers of
Yeah.
funny stuff. I think, you know, I don't know. I mean, I can't, I know where my vote's going to go. And I don't really care, I guess, in reality, where your vote goes. But I do care if you vote or not. You know, we've had
True.
many, many wars fought over the issue of whether we should do this or should do that, or can we do this or can we do that. And the reality is that a lot of people gave up their lives so that we would be able to have this cherished option called voting. Um,
Right.
whether you agree with the platform or
Well,
not.
let's talk about that's block B, about voting and who gets to vote. Like you were saying earlier in the pre-production, well, how do you know if the person who's voting has actually got the right to vote? Because we never check those things.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm looking at my
voter
Elections
card,
Canada. What do they call this thing anyway? It's a numeration card or whatever.
something like
Anyway,
that. Yeah.
it says to vote, you must be a Canadian citizen. Yeah, be 18 years old on election day, right? At least 18 years old on election day, and prove your identity and address. Okay, so
Mm.
on question number one, so what is it that these people here at Elections, how do they know that I'm a Canadian citizen? Because you sent me this little piece of cardboard here, which I'm to take to the polling station. All right. Uh, First of all, who decides why I get this in the first place? Because I don't know where the Genesis document for this is to begin with.
I think
Okay, everybody gets this card, but
I
where did
think
you
that goes
sign
back
up?
to when you file your income taxes, but I don't recall anything on your income tax to say whether you're a
No,
Canadian
sir, it
citizen
doesn't say
or
you
not.
have
You're
to
a
be a
resident
citizen.
of Canada. But
Yeah, like where does this come? See, again, there's the part that makes it interesting for me is if you're going to keep talking about privacy legislation and how one set of data can't be used to do another set of data, right? We do this all the time in Canada. Oh, I can't check your UI or employment records in case you're illegally working here.
mhm.
Okay, well, if that's true, then how do they know I'm a Canadian? Who is Elections Canada to know that I'm a Canadian citizen? Where did they get this information? I'd be really happy to get some email from our readers or listeners, because this one is very conveniently obscure. Okay, for
Yeah.
every must
Yeah.
be 18 years of age. Well, you'll prove that with your identity and address. Okay, fine. So you were saying in pre-production, what about all these students in Ottawa who suddenly are wanting to vote in the ridings in Ottawa? Well, if you're from country X outside of Canada and you're a student there, now suddenly you want to vote. On what basis? Are they getting these cards in their mailboxes? Who,
Well, apparently not, because you can
who's
check it
checking
as long
those
as you
people?
have a neighbor or something vouch for you. So if
Oh,
you
I see.
have a card now, and who's to say that this neighbor is a Canadian citizen, right? I mean,
Well,
it
no,
goes
I mean,
on and
this is the
on.
this is the whole point. If we get down into the weeds here, you talk about the ability to have some skullduggery. And everyone's going on about this is perfectly safe, just like the last one was. So the last one had over 200,000 votes and never got counted because they were fraudulent. Even Elections Canada said that. But
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, the report was, yeah, but it was so small compared to the millions of votes that were cast that were okay. Based on what? Okay, so I know we're going to get all sorts of people saying, "Oh, we're conspiracy nuts," and whatnot. This is nonsense. What we've got here is, are you going to believe that everything here is above board when you have some very, very strategic interests in this particular election? who really, really, really want to win. Because if they lose, there's going to be some really, really difficult questions being asked by some people who will probably be living in the Cayman Islands real quick. There's, because this is one, we've had 10 years of the lumpy carpet syndrome here. There's a lot of stuff under that carpet, you know. And when we're talking about this sort of, well, what exactly are these people up to? Listen, they just this morning announced, or Carney again, up in the thick of it, he's going, well, I'm sorry that we had a smear campaign that we got caught on was issuing buttons at a conference thing that's total. It's right out of the DNC BlackRock playbook in the U.S. The American style of politics, which is spread fear, and then if that doesn't work, smear the candidate. That's what they were doing with this steal the button, stop the steal buttons that they put out into this conference, at this conservative conference, and then all the people did were bragging about it, and then Carney comes out and says, well, the people responsible for doing this have been reassigned. What the hell does that mean? You got caught with your pants down on this, and and now you're going to say, well, don't you saw those genitals? Don't look there.
Our old magician, watch the right hand, not the left. Watch the right.
You can't.
I don't know what it is, Tom. You sit back and you think.
See that people are reassigned. Bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, look, we're just two guys trying to figure it out, but I think the wheels are coming off this guy's campaign, because the very thing that we talked about even earlier in this episode is who is this guy? Like, this essentially the carpetbaggers brought this guy in, and we don't know who he is. Okay?
Well,
we know he's got a thin skin. We know he talks down to people. He's not an organic candidate that's come up through the ranks. This guy has been parachuted in by very suspect interests.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's a couple of things with that though too, Tom. Is that you notice that he's been prime ministerial by order and councils, to the tune where the last one we had $40 billion signed off by the Governor General, supposedly to keep Canada working. But I still can't figure out why. I think one of them was I can't remember, some small department which needed $85 million to operate. Well, that is not, it's not integral to the Canadian infrastructure to keep things running. Why is that happening? Well, the carbon tax, I've reset to zero. I haven't got away with it because I have to go to Parliament. He's never been in Parliament.
No.
To be seen by people on the parliamentary channel and how he would react to the grillings that go on there on a day-to-day basis. We have polls that say he's the best guy to handle Mr. Trump. Well, the only reason we say that is because he's the only one that gets to talk on behalf of the government to Mr. Trump. Maybe my pet dog Skippy could do.
Don't use Skippy. Skippy's not a good word. Oh, the other Skippy. Okay.
Yeah, maybe he could do better dealing with Mr. Trump than what Mr. Carney is, but we won't get that chance because, like it or lump it, he is the guy that's supposedly in charge of the country. Because 200,000 people who happen to be Liberal Party members, who may or may not be Canadian citizens, had said that he's going to be the leader of the party. So I think we talked pre-production. We as Canadians are very shallow. We don't want to dig too deep because we might find something that we really, really don't like. And as a result, many things go unnoticed or undetected or undeterred. And I think we need to start digging a little deeper into a lot of these things. Like, why all of a sudden over the last 5 years did we get 1 million immigrants coming or refugees coming in here? It certainly wasn't any part of a policy that was there that they were voted in on. And we've talked about this before with Mr. Poilievre as well. If he comes in and tries to change things, you and I both know from working with this organization that the bureaucrats that are there will just find a different way to stop that, or not do it, or work around it, or whatever it happens to be. And I mean,
Well, look, without too much disparaging of Canadians, think about this. We have a Brit who holds an Irish passport, who moves all his assets to the USA and to the Cayman Islands, who is supported openly by China, okay, and then we expect him to, do stuff for Canada. Okay,
working our best.
Is that clear? Does that make perfect? I'm thinking, like, what? Name me another country that would do that. Okay, this is so. I mean, the naivety, illness. It's not that. In history, I think you said for how many years have the Liberal Party been in charge of Canada? Over since 1867. Well, frankly, they've been in charge more often than not. Okay, yeah. And here we have a 10-year cycle essentially of these. It's time to rinse this out. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I forget which comedian that was, but he coined the phrase that politicians and baby diapers need to be changed for the exact same reason. And I guess that's the way it is, right?
This bunch does not deserve, another chance. Okay?
No.
Something isn't adding up in this election. Okay, the players don't. Certainly, the trend lines don't make any sense. Like, why would you do the same thing that has proven not to work? Okay, we don't seem to have the intellectual or mental capacity to deal with a problem which is not of our making.
Yeah.
Which is this whole business of Orange Man having done stuff that impacts us. And unlike the other 70 countries that go, you know what, we have to sit down and talk to this guy. These two jokers, and I include Polyev in this, okay, not to be perfect, none of them has got a really clear plan on what to do when they're in office.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, because just calling the Americans bad names and then going on like Pollyanna, well, we were going to do other things. Clearly, the banker thinks he's going to do something more than the politician he's running against. Because he's always had the talk down thing. There are lots of people who actually believe that because he was a Bank of England, a Bank of Canada, he's a bureaucrat all his damn life. He can take on Orange Man, the billionaire businessman, has gone bankrupt and is a felon and has all these other things that they go on about. It's not. No, he doesn't have the gravitas for that. He's not going to. Can you imagine the conversation between this guy and
the president? No.
And the president?
No.
Okay. And I know that Trump has said he doesn't like Polyev. He's made this. I don't think he likes anybody that's running. But the difference is that there's no beholden on the part of the conservatives to this guy. To have some folks on the social media say, "Oh, he's just like Trump." There's nothing. Polyev is nothing like Trump. Okay.
No.
Okay? The guy doesn't have. Trump has a bizarre sense of humor and does really weird stuff to get his way. Okay, and he's come back. This is his second kick at the cat. Polyev has never been prime minister. Okay, mm-hmm. There's no comparison in both the gravitas of the two characters. So that's really silly stuff. That is being made up in the election.
I think some of this just comes from the fact that you put something out in the paper, and it's like, well, it was on the internet. It's got to be true. It was in the newspaper. That's why the Times columnist said, "We'll vote NDP to keep the conservatives out."
Look, the fact is, look, they're carrying an awful lot of baggage. The Carney team. from the Trudeau era. Okay.
Well,
In
they
fact,
are.
it's the same baggage. Wait a minute, what am I talking about? We're talking about the same team carrying the same baggage.
Well, we also then now have the leader of the NDP, Mr. Singh, who is deciding that he'd like to
Who?
have another
What's his
minority
name, sir?
parliament again, so that
Mr.
he can play the king.
Who? Mr. Singh? Who?
Mr. Singh, yeah,
Who is
Mr. Singh.
Oh, you mean that? Oh, wow, I think I've seen him. Yeah.
But he wants a minority parliament so that he can play the kingpin again.
Yeah.
Screw us up like
Be in
he did
Parliament.
over the years.
He had a rally in Saskatoon. I think there were 20 people there. Only can somebody with that kind of political clout screw up an entire country for
Yeah.
5 years running.
Yeah.
But that's
That's Canadian politics.
Look, we need to be positive about Canada, and we can. I think that we can, as in pre-production, saying, I think we can chew gum and walk at the same time. Okay, we can fix this thing with the Americans, and I'm telling both these guys, but particularly Foliev, the first thing you do on the 29th is you pick up the phone and you make an appointment to go see Orange Man. Like him or not, you got to see him, and you got to put down your markers, okay? And you go, and if you don't want tariffs, you say 0 tariffs, and he says 0 tariffs, and we go back to square one. How you deal with the dairy bullshit out of Quebec and some of these other things, which are the non-tariff issues, which of course they're going to hit us on.
Mm-hmm.
That's where tough negotiations go in. I would say to our Premier Smith in Alberta, stop selling oil to the Americans at a 30% discount, because money talks and BS walks.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of things that we can do, and you're going to have to build pipelines whether you like it or not. There's going to have to be some tough slugging going on. By the way, also be prepared for when Polyev and his cabinet sit down and start looking at the books and decide you got nothing but blank pages there and a sea of red ink.
And the printing press that's printing that money for the last 10 years is broken.
It's broken, absolutely. So there's that, and then you're going to have to deal with China, and you're going to have to deal with NATO. You're going to have to actually build a damn military, not just talk about it. And Canadians may not see the tax advantage, because then we have to start buying planes, building ships, hiring personnel. It's going to cost money. You're not going to be able to do that because it's a good idea. You're going to have to do it because you're going to have to generate the wealth to buy those ships, to build those planes, to hire that military, and do what you said you're going to do for the last 20 years, because I include Mr. Harper in that.
Well, again, in fairness to the previous government, they had made some decisions. Right? It wasn't our illustrious former leader who says he's going to whip down his pants and see who has the biggest F-18 contract, and then they canceled this whole thing, right? And then go back to this whole thing.
No, this tough. Listen, there's going to be tough slugging. Okay, no matter how we look at it, it'll be much worse if we don't have a coherent foreign policy. And no one talks about this. Whole campaign talks about houses and crime on the street, all that, but we don't seem to have a handle. I think, and I'll end on this for today. You don't have a handle on how we deal with the rest of the world. From a perspective of economics, of military, of the whole foreign policy, foreign aid. This is like it's like it's off the table. Carney has this apparently business plan of everything will be business as usual on that thing. We have to give money, billions of dollars, to other people. No, we have to bring that money back to Canada. We got to build. We got to get the homeless off the streets. We have to cut down on the lineups at food banks.
Well,
we got to figure out how to get the young people to
do. All those people that are hooked on some kind of drugs.
All this is straightforward.
Foreign talk. You're right. We have to start repairing our ties with India. Right? I mean, that's virtually gone. Like it or lump, they're if they are not the largest population base, they soon will be. That's another market that we could certainly try and get into, but the way things are right now, that's not happening.
And we have to deal with the reality of where we are in this hemisphere. Okay, we are in North America. I don't care what Mexico does, I care what we do bilaterally with the Americans. We
Mm.
cannot, like a ship, just get off, take the ropes off and sail off someplace else. That's not going to happen. And we can't paper over, as I said earlier, 100 years of social, economic, military tie-up with some hairy-fairy stuff about we're going to buy Rafale fighters from France, and we're going. And as I say, this current bunch is mute on China. Okay, all I'm going to say is if you play this stupid game with Orange Man, just to use it in the vernacular, think about Panama. The
Yeah.
Panamanians thought they were really clever. Okay, well, they weren't very clever by half.
Well, that's right. And, not to belittle a movie, but it was always that famous line in Forrest Gump. Stupid is as stupid does.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like I said, we can chew gum and walk at the same time, but we're going to have to make some serious investments, not by the government, by the way, because when you compare the economy of the US and Canada, but when they talk about going forward, they don't talk about the government building cars or the government building pipelines or the government building buses or car. It's foreign investment. And foreign investment's pouring into that country. And we haven't had any real foreign investment in this country for a decade. Okay, hence the 1.4% GDP growth.
Yeah, that's true.
Mr. Carney cannot start printing money and do the same thing they did with the Ingersoll auto plant, where they start building these electric vans that nobody wants to buy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the tariffs. It had nothing to do with the tariffs. You're building something nobody wanted. And by the way, there was no private money in that. And why are we giving millions and billions of dollars to American corporations so they'll stay in Canada? How stupid is that? If General Motors thought there was a business plan for building those vans, they would build those vans. But they must sit around in Dearborn and those places and go, hey, let's tell those crazy Canadians that well, if you don't give us a lot of money, we're just going to move. Oh, they'll give us the money. Don't worry about it. They're fools.
Yeah.
Okay. That's we gotta grow up. We gotta understand that this is big league stuff, and we're minor league players if we keep doing this.
Yeah.
We'll never, And I think we need to talk about our futures of our kids, of our grandkids, of a country that's still sewn together from coast to coast to coast. Otherwise, this Pollyanna stuff that's being bandied about, and like I say, even the conservatives got to pull up your socks and start talking serious foreign policy, talk serious economic policy, how you're going to attract foreign investment. Forget the Chinese, okay? Because those guys are going to be off the radar. But you're going to have to get Americans to come back to invest in this country. Because at some point, we still have to trade. When I hear Trump going, we don't need their lumber, we don't need their oil, we don't. Yes, you do. We know they do. Okay, that's just nonsense. But in order for those to function like they have in the past, vast majority of Canadian corporations in this country are American subsidiaries or something like that. Okay, and the Brookfield hedge fund that Mr. Carney's so proud of is the same bunch that's going around putting pipelines into other countries, which will then turn around and say, well, maybe we'll put some into Canada. Well, isn't that, delicious here? I mean, come on. So, with 2 weeks to go, I think we really need to
do a little
get into the weeds a little bit here.
Yeah, get out of the duck pond, get out of the weeds. Maybe take an internal look at navel gazing and come up with something. Don't just believe what you're reading or what you think. Get out and ask hard questions like the press should be doing.
Well, it's like I said to a neighbor. I said the other day, who's really a fence sitter on this because he watches CNN and CBC. That's his news outlets, and that's how his world is formed. I said, do you ever read a book or go online or ask quite well? Anyway, my question to him was, do you feel better off today than you did 5 years ago? And are you happier today than you were 5 years ago? Two simple questions. One, which is something that you can actually quantify economically, and the other one, which is a little more esoteric, and it's emotional. I mean, do you feel more comfortable walking down your street, or are you happier in your life than you were 5 years ago? Those are two simple questions. If you answer yes to those two, I know what you're going to do. If you answer no to those two questions, or even one of them, I also know what you're going to do. So I leave it at that.
Yeah, wow. Think about it. Don't take the word of anybody. You know, the only person you can really trust is yourself. And that means you're going to have to get down and do some thinking and some digging and some soul searching.
Yep.
You know, that goes to our American friends as well as the Canadian people here.
Yep.
At the end of the day, the reality is whatever government we elect in, you have an option to not vote them in 4 or 5 years from now.
Yeah. Well, I would rather have a 4 year stretch of a different government to see how, things can be turned around. And it's not going to be, as I said, let me reiterate, there's no good times immediately on the 29th of April. It's going to be tough times, because we still have to sit down with our pals to the south and fix a lot of stuff that's been wrecked in the last 8-10 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And not just on our side, on their side too, because there's been a lot of things said which should not have been taken seriously, or shouldn't have been said in the first place. But okay, we know that damage, I think, can be fixed. It's not that deep a cut, you might say, to the relationship, but that's what has to be fixed. And when we talk about what's strategically important, I agree that we shouldn't be importing our pharmaceuticals from China or anywhere else. I agree that we should make our own steel to build our own buildings and cars. A lot of things that Orange Man says is identical to what we need to do in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And once we start doing that and seriously competing on an even field with our pals to the south, things will balance them. I hate to use that word. It'll balance themselves out. Where have we heard that? Budgets balance themselves.
No, that was dealing with budgets and deficits.
Yeah. Well, I believe sincerely that when we sit down with these guys from a position of honesty, strength, and viability, then we'll be fine. And and
right, you're right. When we have to go in up here, not here.
Yeah.
Think with the head, not with the heart.
That's right. And once thinking with the head works and it starts showing results, the heart will understand.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's what we hope.
Well, we're at the end of the line.
Another episode coming to an end.
Yeah, for the what is today? Today is the 14th of April. So we're sorry we're a couple of days late in our weekly broadcast, but don't forget, hit the like button. Remember that like button. Subscribe.
Yeah. If we get a few more people buying us a coffee, we'd sure appreciate it.
So, that would be grand. Yes, indeed.
It would.
And don't forget, we'll give you our post-mortem of the French debate, which is on the 17th. Right.
Well, you might be able to, because my French will be rusty. But...
Well, no, Mr. Carney's French will be easy to follow. I'll leave it at that.
Maybe.
All right.
Have fun.
You too.